So I realized recently that I have been in the camper for almost 2.5 years, which is insane. But I've never shared why I chose RV life and why I got started with it. So here we are today. Grab your drink. I have a little iced coffee here, even though the ice is melted because it's like 80 degrees in Florida right now. And I'm going to share a little bit about my RV life journey. Hopefully, if you are starting a camping journey or an RV life journey, you'll find this inspirational, especially as a young person. I know not a lot of young people do this lifestyle, so I thought it'd be interesting for you to kind of hear what led me to this and also what I would do differently. So my entire idea for living nomadically, I will say, came from when I was in college. So this was back in like 2021, 2022. I had thought for my entire life that I wanted a 9-to-5 office job, working, doing video editing. I knew I wanted to do video editing since I was like 12, but I thought that office life was perfect for me. But when I got closer to graduating college, that became less of my dream. And I started kind of leaning more towards like my content creation, and I was watching a lot of people on YouTube that did van life. And I was so interested in doing van life. But honestly, vans can get quite expensive, and I was not about to drop a loan or anything like that to do this lifestyle. And another thing that really irked me about van life was how small it is. A lot of vans, I mean, like I said, this was back when van life was kind of just getting started and it was like still really popular. A lot of vans didn't have bathrooms. A lot of them didn't have full kitchens. They didn't have showers, and I was not about to go dig a hole out in the yard to go to the bathroom. So a bathroom was a number one for me, and also having like an actual decent kitchen to cook in, because if I'm going to be living out of it 365 days a year, I need to be able to do basic human things. So those were my two requirements. So one day my mom asked me, what would you do if you could do anything? Like, money is not included, like don't worry about anything, just like what is your dream? And the first thing that popped into my head was travel. So that's what I said. And that's kind of where I started to form this dream life of van life. All the stuff I've been seeing on YouTube started becoming closer to a reality, and we started working towards that. So I started doing a ton of research. I was looking up a bunch of stuff, van life, you know, how to afford it, what people do, what other kind of options are there. I saw people living out of their cars. I saw so much stuff. But then in my research, I came across RV life, and that seemed like the most applicable to me because it was a full living space, which, I mean, some campers can get huge. They have multiple slide outs, bedrooms, you name it, there's a camper for it. I wasn't really looking in that range, but I was still able to get something that would fit what I wanted. And I would have enough space to do whatever, but I could still drive down the road with it. Which is another thing that I was so scared of, was learning how to drive a truck and an RV once I finally decided that RV life was what I wanted. The biggest thing that I had driven at that time was my Ford Fusion, and going from a Ford Fusion to a big dually truck with a camper behind it was such a transition, but I'm telling you, it wasn't as bad as it seemed. And there's a lot of ways that you can get around like backing up with it, which backing up is probably everyone's number one biggest fear when it comes to buying a trailer or something that you have to pull behind your car, is backing it up. And so many places, almost every RV park has pull-through sites now, so it's really not something that you have to do unless you're in like a dire situation. I've had to do it a couple times, and there have been a couple of spots that I've stayed in that were back-ins, and I did not like them. So once I decided on a camper over a van, I started doing a little bit more research as to what kind of camper I wanted. I decided on a fifth wheel, as you could probably tell, you know that already, because fifth wheels were what my dad said was easiest to maneuver when you're trying to back in or pull through or whatever, because the fifth wheel sits in the back of your truck a little bit, and that also helps kind of shrink it when you're going down the road. So like, my camper's 25 feet, but I would say like at least a good 8 to 10 feet of it sit in the bed of my truck. So it's really only 10 feet behind me what I would normally be, if that makes sense. You can kind of get a bigger fifth wheel than you would just like a regular pull behind camper and still be the same size on the road. So I really liked that option as well. And I knew that I didn't want a motorhome or like a Class C or anything because I didn't want the possibility of my home being stuck in the shop. So a motorhome is you can't detach your house from the motor. So let's say something goes wrong with the car part of it, your house is stuck in the shop and you have to find a hotel and like do all that sort of stuff, and vice versa. If something's wrong with the inside, then you're like driving that around. It just seemed too risky for me, whereas this is detachable parts, so if there's something wrong with my truck, I can fix the truck. If there's something wrong with the camper, I can leave the camper, go in the truck, do whatever I need to do, and come back and fix the camper, which I've had to do multiple times. So I'm very glad that I have detachable driving and living spaces. So my ultimate goal when starting RV life was to travel and basically live my dream life of getting to see the States while also working from home. And I did that for a long time. And I'm very happy that I got to visit 13 states last year. It was such a big feat for me to go to a different state every single week for like 2 months, at least 2 months. It was an amazing trip. It was so fun and I got to see so much stuff. I do have a series for that on my channel if you want to check it out. It's called 32 and 23, so make sure you go check out that playlist if you have not seen that series. It was so fun for me to do solo travel around the United States. But my plans kind of shifted a little bit when I lost my job. So I was doing remote work, remote video editing work, which was literally my dream job. I got it straight out of college. Praise God for that. Like, I was so incredibly blessed to get that opportunity. They did end up ending my contract because they were moving to internal editors and I didn't live in Paris, so they weren't going to hire me because I couldn't go to the office, which is where the office was. So they ended my contract, unfortunately. And from there, I started doing work camping, which is where I spent the last 2 years of my life, was work camping at a campground. And I did a little bit on and off through there. Like, I moved into a house at some point for like 5 months because I was a manager at the campground, but the RV was still here and mom and dad stayed out of it. And that was just kind of like a weird period in my life. And now, where I'm at now is in Florida, and we're going to be staying here for the foreseeable future. And the only thing that has changed from the first winter that I was here to this winter is that I'm married now and I have another person living in the camper with me. So that's kind of my RV life journey. It really sounds like it's like way longer than 2.5 years of history when I say it like that, but a lot has happened. A lot can happen in a short amount of time, and that's one thing I've learned. Since moving into the camper, I have completely renovated it, and we still even did some renovations this year. So the RV is kind of ever changing. It's just nice to be able to change it whenever we need to suit different needs. Before, it worked perfectly with one person, but then we needed to make a little bit more space to be able to accommodate 2 people, and it was so nice to be able to just change it to be how we wanted it to be with the space that we have. So some of the things that surprised me about RV life is I didn't really know what to expect going into it, but it wasn't as much of a transition as I thought it would be. It was super easy to go from a dorm room to living in here, and that's really what I did. I never had a big space. I grew up, I had 1 bedroom in my parents' house. Obviously, like, I had the kitchen and bathroom and everything like that. But the bedroom was like my space. Sorry, my camera died. But what I was saying was when I went to college, I lived in the dorms all 4 years. I never had a house or an apartment or anything like that. And then I moved straight from the dorms into the camper, essentially. There was a couple months of in between. But I never had a big, huge space to myself. So the transition wasn't that hard. I think it's harder when you're like older and you move into a camper like my parents did, because they had an entire 3-4 bedroom house of stuff that they had to figure out what to do with when they moved into a camper. I didn't have any of those problems. So that's what I really enjoyed, is the transition was really easy. So that surprised me because I thought it was going to be a little bit harder than it was. And then I also surprised myself with how easily I adapted to this lifestyle. So like I said, driving the truck with the camper behind it, I did an entire huge road trip by myself. And I was a little bit nervous like the first time I drove, But after we came down here, I had no reservations whatsoever, and I pretty much had it down. And I'm so surprised that I was able to do it that easily. And so if I'm able to do it, you can too. Like 100%. It's definitely something that takes practice and patience to learn, but once you're there, you have it. And then that's a skill that you have for the rest of your life. Like, I will always know how to hook up a fifth wheel by myself, which a lot of people do it with somebody else helping them back it up. I learned how to hook up my trailer on my own, like set up and tear down. I did that multiple times in a week when I was on my road trip, so it's something that I'll always know how to do, which is so nice to have kind of in my back pocket. Another thing that surprised me about this lifestyle is, I'm not gonna lie, I thought that it would be cheaper than like living somewhere where you have to pay $1,000 in rent, like in an apartment building and all that kind of stuff. It's probably evens out. The expenses are just different. So yes, you pay less for rent, but you pay more for gas, especially if you're like kind of in the middle of nowhere like we are. It is a lot different, but the expenses kind of equal out. So I would say this lifestyle can be cheaper, but for the most part, it probably won't be. And that's just the realistic part of it. And you really have to watch what you're doing and make sure you have like a steady income, especially if you're moving around a lot. So that's something that I wasn't expecting as well. Okay, now for the big question of what I would do differently. I thought so hard about this because I wanted to come up with something to say that I would do differently, or like to make it easier. The only thing I can really say is to be a little bit more prepared for my driving days, but the lifestyle itself and everything I've done in these last 2.5 years, I don't think I would really change anything. And that is saying something because I made a lot of mistakes, but the journey I've been down is the most valuable part of this experience because I have learned so much out of every mishap. I traveled for months without a spare tire for my camper. I don't know how I did that because the spare tire and like my tire pressure monitoring system, I have used probably more than anything else on travel days. I have needed that spare so many times, and I don't know how I just raw dogged it for like months when I first moved into the camper. I don't think I had a spare on the trip when we came down from Wisconsin to Florida for the first time, which is crazy. I always keep extra bearings in the truck with me as well. Bearings are something that I go through, or have gone through a couple times. We've had to stop and change out a bearing in the middle of the road or on the side of the road. But those are really the only two things that I would tell myself to have going into it that I didn't have at the start. I think everything else I was very prepared for. And this isn't really a big deal, but I would say one more thing of like, I could have more than I thought I could. So when I first moved in, I downsized everything, especially my clothes. I got rid of a lot of clothes because I was just thinking that there wasn't going to be space for them. But honestly, when I first moved in and I came down here, I had more space than I thought I did. So I didn't have to get rid of nearly as much as I had. Is it bad to get rid of things? No. But on the other hand, I miss a lot of my clothing. So I guess I did have 3 things that I would do differently. But on the big scheme of things, like how I learned along the road and doing a lot of things just by figuring them out as they came up, that was the perfect way to do it. And that's really the only way you can learn things, is by going through them, because you cannot plan for every situation. And so just learning to deal with things as they came up, I got really good at that because I had to. And I think that's the one thing about this lifestyle that is so invaluable, is the skill to just go with the flow, and when problems arise, you fix them, and that's all you can do. We almost made it through the coffee. I cannot believe that I've never shared my entire story as to how I got where I am now. So we're going on 3 years of the RV life, which is insane. It'll be 3 years in September, which is quite a ways away. I mean, it's only 6 months away though now. It's literally March. Don't talk to me about that. Time is flying. But I really hope you found this insightful. If you have any other questions about RV life or how I got started in this lifestyle, what I do for work, all that stuff, any questions at all, make sure you leave them in the comments and I'll answer you either in the comments themselves or in another video. I really love chatting with you guys and I want to know if you have any questions. So please leave a comment down below. Say hi. I'll say hi back. But that's it for this video. I love you so, so much and I'll see you next week in my next video.